It was my son's birthday, and I arrived at his home early with his favorite dessert. I knocked on the door with a smile, expecting to see his face light up the way it did when he was just a boy. But when he opened it, his expression was one of pure annoyance, as if my presence was an unwelcome interruption. "Oh, it's you," he mumbled, not even bothering to meet my eyes. But before we continue, please check if you're already subscribed to the channel, and drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel. I can still recall the scent of the New York-style cheesecake I brought to my son Ethan's house that afternoon. It was his 43rd birthday, and I had dipped into 3 months of my pension savings to afford that little masterpiece from the downtown bakery he adored. It was $220 I didn't really have, but I spent it gladly for a chance to see him smile. The cab dropped me in front of the mansion I had helped him finance 5 years prior, a 3-story home in the most exclusive neighborhood in Miami, complete with an ocean view and an infinity pool. My contribution had been $80,000 from my savings for the down payment, money I had scrimped and saved, penny by penny, over 45 years as a history professor, taking on extra evening classes and weekend tutoring sessions. I smoothed down my turquoise blazer, also new for the occasion, and rang the bell, balancing the cake box in one hand and clutching a small, silver-wrapped package in the other. Inside was a vintage watch that had belonged to my own father. 3 generations of strong men, I thought. What a wonderful legacy to pass on. The door swung open, but Ethan's face didn't brighten as I had hoped. His eyes barely grazed mine before darting back to the phone in his hand. "Oh, it's you," he muttered, stepping aside to let me in. There was no kiss, no hug, as if I were just another package delivery. "Happy birthday, my boy," I said, trying to keep the cheerfulness in my voice. "I brought your favorite cheesecake and a little something special." Ethan let out a deep sigh, as if my very presence was a burden he was forced to endure. "Just put it on the kitchen counter. I need to finish this call." I walked alone into the Italian marble kitchen, another gift from me when they remodeled, and placed the cake carefully on the island. Through the window, I saw the twins, my 11-year-old grandsons, playing in the pool with their swimming coach. They didn't even notice I was there. I just stood, listening to the echoes in the cavernous house, feeling like an intruder in a space where I clearly wasn't wanted. 15 minutes later, Ethan walked into the kitchen. He looked as stunning as ever, perfectly styled hair, flawless skin, manicured nails. All of it was supported by the high-end design studio I had financed for him 8 years ago. That was $35,000 for him to chase his entrepreneurial dream, a loan I'd taken out against my own condo, a loan that was never repaid. "So," he said, opening the fridge and pulling out a bottle of sparkling water, "did you just come to drop off the cake, or are you planning to stay for dinner?" The coldness in his tone cut me like a knife. I swallowed hard, trying to keep the disappointment from showing. "I thought maybe we could spend some time together for your birthday. It's been almost 2 months since we've seen each other." He responded, glancing at his phone again. "Actually, I have plans later. Michael is taking me out to dinner at the Tide. Just the 2 of us." Michael, his third partner, a man who lived off vague investments and who, strangely, always seemed to need my financial help for his emergency projects. The last one had been just 3 weeks ago, $6,000 for a supposed import deal that couldn't wait. It was money I had pulled from my medical savings. "I see," I replied, trying to hide the hurt in my voice. "Well, perhaps we can do lunch tomorrow then." Ethan rolled his eyes and finally looked at me directly. His face was tense, as if he were holding back something he'd wanted to say for a long time. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, gesturing to the tall stools around the kitchen island. "Sit down." I obeyed, a knot forming in my stomach. I knew that tone. It was the same one he used as a child right before saying something deliberately cruel to test my limits. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," he began, slowly turning the glass of water between his hands. "About my birthday, about life, about what would truly make me happy." I nodded, trying to appear encouraging. "Of course, son, tell me what's on your mind. Maybe I can help somehow." Ethan set the glass down on the counter with a thud and looked me straight in the eye. What I saw there sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't love, not even fleeting irritation. It was pure contempt. "The one thing I'd really like for my birthday," he said slowly, enunciating each word with deliberate cruelty, "is for you to just disappear from my life, for you to just get out and leave us alone." The world stopped. The air was sucked out of the room. I tried to speak, but my throat closed up. It felt as if someone had physically punched me in the chest. "What?" was all I could whisper. "You heard me," he continued, his voice now a calculated chill. "I'm tired of you, Dad. Tired of your constant calls, your unannounced visits, your way of always meddling in my life with your outdated advice, and your unbearable emotional neediness." My hands started to shake uncontrollably. 74 years of life, 43 of them as his father, and never, not once, did I imagine I would hear such words from my only son. "Ethan," I managed to say, tears welling up, "I'm your father. I gave you everything. I sacrificed everything for you." "Exactly," he exclaimed, pushing himself off the stool. "That's why you're suffocating me. I can't breathe with you always around. I need space. I need freedom. I need to live my life without having to manage your expectations and your emotional drama." I looked at the birthday cake, the candles still in the box, waiting to be lit. Everything I had envisioned for the day, hugs, laughter, shared memories, vanished like smoke. "But Ethan," I tried one last time, "I just want to be close to you, to be a part of your life. You're all I have." "And that's precisely the problem," he shot back, crossing his arms. "The fact that I'm all you have. Get your own life and leave me alone." I slid off the stool, my legs trembling so badly I feared I would collapse. I picked up my bag and the small package with the watch. The cake would stay. Perhaps the twins would enjoy it even if their father couldn't. "I can't believe you're saying this to me," I mumbled, "after everything I've done for you." "Everything you did," he scoffed sarcastically. "Dad, everything you did was for your own benefit, to feel needed, to have control over my life. But I'm not a child anymore, and I don't need you smothering me." I walked toward the door, each step feeling like it was costing me years of my life. At the threshold, I turned back one last time, hoping to see some flicker of regret in his eyes, some trace of the sweet little boy I had raised with so much love. But all I saw was impatience. Impatience for me to be gone so he could get on with his life, free from the burden I apparently represented. "Happy birthday, Ethan," I whispered, and I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. What my son didn't know, as he watched me leave on that sunny afternoon, was that he had ignited something within me that had been dormant for decades. It wasn't a flame of self-destruction, but of rebirth. The taxi dropped me off in front of my small apartment downtown, a modest 2-bedroom place I had bought with the money from selling the family home after my wife passed away 20 years ago. I staggered inside, dropped my bag on the floor, and collapsed onto the worn-out sofa. The same sofa where I had rocked Ethan as a baby, where I had read him stories every night, where I had dried his tears after every disappointment. His words echoed in my mind like a cruel refrain, "Just disappear from my life." My own son had wished for my absence as a birthday gift. The pain was physical, an overwhelming weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I spent the night awake, replaying every moment, every sacrifice, every dollar I had invested in him over 4 decades. When Ethan was 5 and diagnosed with severe asthma, I worked double shifts at the university to pay for specialized treatments the insurance wouldn't cover. That was $18,000 in consultations and medicine, money I got by selling the wedding bands my wife and I had shared. At 16, when he wanted to do a student exchange program in France, I mortgaged this very apartment to pay the $25,000 fee. "Thanks, Dad," he had said then, hugging me tightly at the airport. "You're simply the best father in the world." Words that now seem to belong to another lifetime, another person. In college, when Ethan switched his major 3 times, from law to architecture, then to business, I paid for every semester without a single complaint. In total, it was nearly $48,000. Money I earned by teaching extra classes on weekends and holidays, sacrificing any personal life I might have had. When he married his first partner, an extravagant ceremony for 300 guests at the city's finest hotel. I was the one who paid for everything, $42,000. The designer suits, the imported flowers, the live orchestra, the gourmet banquet. "This is the happiest day of my life, Dad," he had said, beaming. "And it's all thanks to you." The divorce came 2 years later, followed by a second, even more expensive union that also ended in less than 3 years. And then came Michael, the current partner, the 3-story mansion, the design studio, the luxury car I helped finance when the old one broke down, $22,000, and the bilingual private schools for the twins at $4,800 per term. As dawn broke, I started doing the math. I found an old box where I kept all the receipts, all the transfer confirmations, all the contracts I had signed over the years, not out of distrust, but out of habit. An old history professor never loses his organizational skills. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea I had no heart to drink, I began to list every amount, every date, every reason. The total left me breathless, over $480,000 across 43 years, almost $500,000 that I had dedicated to my son's happiness. And all of it, just to hear that his greatest wish was for me to disappear. A strange thing happened as I looked at those numbers. The sharp, stabbing pain I had felt all night began to morph into something else. It wasn't anger, though there was anger too. It was a crystal-clear clarity I had never experienced before. A profound understanding that I had been manipulated for decades by someone who saw my love as a utility, not a sacred bond. If I had invested that nearly $500,000 in myself, if I had traveled, studied more, bought a better home, taken care of my health, planned a comfortable retirement, where would I be now? Certainly not in this small apartment, counting the cents of my dwindling pension, postponing medical treatments so I could keep helping a son who wished I would just vanish. At 6 a.m., I did something I had never done before. I picked up my phone and blocked Ethan's number. Then I blocked Michael's. Then every number associated with his family. It was a small gesture, but symbolically powerful. My first act of self-preservation in 4 decades. I took a long shower, put on my best clothes, a suit and blazer I rarely wore to save them, and walked out of my home with a defined purpose that for the first time in years did not involve my son. First stop, the bank. The same bank where Ethan and I had a joint emergency account, into which I regularly deposited small sums for any unforeseen issues that might arise in his life. An account that, at that moment, had a balance of $18,000. "Good morning, David." The manager, Mr. Ortega, greeted me. He had known me for years. "What can I do for you today?" "I want to close the joint account, number 4NEILA52678891, I responded with a calm that surprised even myself. "Are you sure? That account has a considerable balance," he cautioned, checking his computer. "Absolutely certain," I confirmed, signing the forms with a steady hand. "I'd like to transfer the entire amount to my personal account, please." Seeing that $18,000 returned to my own account gave me a strange sense of power, a power I hadn't felt in decades. It was just the beginning. Next stop, the real estate finance office. When Ethan and Michael bought the oceanfront mansion, I didn't just provide the down payment. I also co-signed the mortgage. That meant if they couldn't pay, the responsibility would fall on me. But it also meant I had rights to that property. David, the loan officer, Mrs. Ramirez, welcomed me with a smile. "What brings you in today?" "I want to review the terms of the mortgage contract where I'm listed as a co-signer," I explained. "I need to understand my exact rights and obligations." As she retrieved the documents, I remembered the day I signed those papers. Ethan had cried with emotion. "Thank you, Dad. You're our guardian angel. I love you so much," he had said, hugging me tightly. Michael had also been profusely grateful, assuring me they would never miss a payment. "Here's all the paperwork," Mrs. Ramirez said, placing a thick folder in front of me. "As the co-signer, you are responsible for the payments if the primary holders default. But you also have the right to make a claim on the property if you believe the debtors will be unable to fulfill their obligations." "Exactly," I responded, carefully examining each page. What would be the next steps if I decided to exercise my rights as a co-signer? You would need to demonstrate that there's a risk of default, or that there have already been significant delays, she explained. What Mrs. Ramirez didn't know, and what Ethan had unknowingly revealed to me the previous week, was that Michael had recently lost a substantial sum in a failed investment, and they had missed the last mortgage payment, a piece of information he shared casually, likely expecting me to offer help as I always did. Perfect, I murmured, collecting copies of all the important documents. And if I wanted to initiate that process? Mrs. Ramirez looked at me with curiosity but remained professional. I can schedule a meeting with our legal department if you wish. Please do. As I left the office, I felt a strange lightness, as if I were floating above the hot city sidewalks. For 43 years, I had lived for Ethan. I had sacrificed my own dreams, my money, my time, my health, everything to give him the life he always wanted. And the result? He wanted me to disappear as a birthday gift. My next stop was a place I hadn't visited in years, the New Horizons travel agency, specializing in new beginnings for seniors. I had kept one of their brochures for years, secretly dreaming of possibilities that always seemed out of reach. Good afternoon, a young consultant named Lucia greeted me. How can I help you? I saw your program about retirees abroad, I answered, sitting comfortably in the chair across from her desk. I'd like complete information on how a 74-year-old man can start a new life in Portugal. The following days were a roller coaster of emotions and secret preparations. Each morning, I woke with a mix of pain, determination, and something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. It was as if I had awakened from a long trance where I lived only to satisfy my son's whims, and now, finally, I was living for myself. On Tuesday, my phone rang insistently. It was Ethan. I ignored the call. He called 5 more times, leaving increasingly irritated messages. Dad, I need to talk to you. Dad, are you okay? Why aren't you answering? Dad, the twins have a school presentation on Thursday, and we need you to watch them afterward. Dad, I'm starting to get worried. The irony was not lost on me. The same man who had wished for me to disappear from his life was now worried because I wasn't answering his calls. Not because he missed me or cared about my well-being, but because he needed me for something. On Wednesday, I had a visit from my neighbor and lifelong friend, Doris, a 70-year-old woman who had silently witnessed all my sacrifices for Ethan over the decades. David, she said, sitting in my living room with a cup of coffee. You look different. Did something happen? I told her everything. Every painful word from Ethan's birthday, every detail of the plans I was making. Doris listened in silence, her eyes gradually filling with tears. My goodness, David, she whispered when I finished. I can't believe Ethan would say something so cruel after everything you've done for him. The most painful part is that he said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world, I explained. As if I were just an obstacle in his life that needed to be removed. And you're really going to Portugal? Yes, I replied firmly. I've already bought the ticket. I'm leaving next week. Doris held my hands gently. You know you have my full support, right? What Ethan did is unforgivable. There's something else, I said, lowering my voice. I'm going to need your help with something very specific. I laid out my entire plan. I wanted Ethan to believe I was gone. Truly gone, at least for a while. Doris would be my accomplice, the one to find my empty apartment and the farewell letter I would leave behind. It's brilliant, Doris murmured with a conspiratorial smile. That ungrateful boy is finally going to understand what it means to lose you. Will you help me? Of course I will. In fact, I think it's exactly the wake-up call Ethan needs. That night I worked on the most important letter of my life, the letter that would change everything forever. I wrote and rewrote every word, making sure it conveyed exactly what I wanted to say. My dear Ethan, I began. For your birthday, you asked me to disappear from your life. I have decided to grant you your wish. By the time you read this letter, I will be far away, starting the life I should have lived decades ago, instead of sacrificing it all for you. I continued writing for hours, documenting every dollar I had spent on him, every sacrifice I had made, every opportunity I had lost by always being available for his needs. But it wasn't a bitter letter, it was an educational one. I wanted him to understand exactly what he had lost. Along with this letter, you will find copies of all the legal documents I signed this week. I continued. The change to my will, the cancellation of your supplemental health insurance plan that I paid for, the notification that as your mortgage co-signer I have decided to exercise my rights due to your recent financial instability, and the termination of all benefits you received from me. It was an 18-page letter that meticulously detailed everything that would change in his life now that I had disappeared, exactly as he wished. Your life will be much simpler without me, I concluded, but it will also be much more expensive. I hope it's worth it. On Thursday, as I packed my most important belongings into 2 suitcases, I received another call from Ethan. Again, I didn't answer. He called 4 more times, leaving increasingly desperate messages. In the last one, his voice sounded genuinely distressed. Dad, please, call me. Something's happened. I need your help. The bank called us for an emergency meeting tomorrow about the mortgage. Please call me as soon as you get this message. So, that was it. The bank had already contacted him about my request to review the contract. Reality was starting to set in. On Friday, Michael showed up at my door. He looked exhausted and desperate, with deep, dark circles under his eyes and an unshaven face. A far cry from the always polished and confident man I knew. David, he said in a pleading voice. Ethan told me what happened between you two. I know what he said was terrible, unforgivable even. But please don't do this to our family. Do what? I asked, feigning innocence. The bank told us you're starting a process to take over the house because of late mortgage payments. Please, David. It was just 1 month. I had some trouble with an investment, but I'll sort it all out, I promise. It was fascinating. When Ethan wanted to get rid of me, I was a nuisance. But when they realized I held the financial reins that sustained their luxurious lifestyle, suddenly I was important again. Michael, I said calmly, your partner was very clear with me. My presence in his life is a burden he no longer wants to bear. I am simply respecting his wishes. But David, you know how Ethan gets when he's angry. He didn't mean it. He sounded quite convincing when he wished for me to disappear from his life as a birthday gift. Michael hung his head. He knew he had no argument to defend the indefensible. Please, he insisted, just give me a chance to fix this. I'll talk to Ethan. I'll make him understand how wrong he was. It's too late for that, I replied, slowly closing the door. Give my grandsons a kiss for me. Saturday was my last day in the city where I had spent my entire life. I walked through the places that had been important to me. The university where I taught for 38 years, the park where I used to take Ethan as a child, the church where I married his mother. It was my silent farewell to a life I had lived completely for others. On Sunday, a life I would finally live for myself would begin. On Sunday morning, Doris knocked on my door as we had arranged. She brought fresh coffee and a conspiratorial smile that filled me with energy. Ready for your great escape? She asked, winking. More than ready, I replied, carrying my 2 suitcases to the door. Do you have the spare keys to my apartment? Right here, she said, holding up the set I had given her the night before. And I also have the letter for Ethan and all the documents you're leaving behind. We had planned everything meticulously. Doris would wait until Tuesday to go to Ethan's place and deliver the documents, pretending she had found my apartment empty and had become worried about my disappearance. Remember, I instructed her as we waited for the taxi, you have to seem genuinely concerned. Tell him I didn't answer the phone for 2 days, that you knocked on my door with no response, and that when you used the emergency keys, you found the apartment empty with the letter. Don't you worry, David. I was an amateur theater teacher for 20 years. This will be the performance of a lifetime, Doris assured me with a mischievous grin. The taxi arrived promptly at 6 a.m. As the driver loaded my suitcases, I took one last look at my apartment. I had lived there for 15 years, but strangely, I felt no nostalgia. It was as if I were finally breaking free from a prison I had built for myself. To the airport? the driver asked. To the airport, I confirmed, and it felt as if those 3 words marked the beginning of my new existence. The flight to Lisbon was long but peaceful. For the first time in decades, no one knew where I was. No one could call me to ask for favors, money, or time. It was an intoxicating feeling of freedom I hadn't experienced since before I became a father. During the nearly 12-hour flight, I wrote in my journal everything that had happened in the last week. Every detail, every emotion, every decision that had brought me to this moment, suspended in the sky between my past of self-denial and my future of self-discovery. This is the first time in 43 years, I wrote, that I have done something entirely for myself, without calculating how it would benefit Ethan. It is terrifying and liberating all at once. I arrived in Lisbon on Monday morning, local time. A representative from the travel agency was waiting for me at the airport with a sign bearing my name. He was a kind young man named Miguel, who spoke English with a charming Portuguese accent. Mr. David, he greeted me with a genuine smile. Welcome to Portugal. I hope you're ready for a new adventure. More than ready, I replied, and for the first time in weeks my smile was completely authentic. Miguel drove me to a small but charming furnished apartment in the Alfama district that the agency had rented for a month, while I decided if I wanted to stay permanently. It was on the 3rd floor of a centuries-old building, with windows overlooking a tree-lined square, and balconies overflowing with flowers on the neighboring buildings. Here is all the information about the city, Miguel said, handing me a thick folder. Recommended restaurants, cultural activities, social groups for expatriates, Portuguese classes, medical contacts in case you need them. I've also scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor for Wednesday to help you with the paperwork if you decide to stay permanently. That afternoon, after a short rest, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went for a walk with no destination, no schedule, no commitments, and no one waiting for me to solve their problems. I wandered through the narrow, winding streets of Alfama, marveling at the medieval architecture, the small corner cafes, the artisan shops. I sat in a plaza and ordered a gallo and a pastel de nata. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, watching the pigeons, the tourists, the locals. A strange feeling began to form in my chest. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't guilt. It was peace. As I walked back to the apartment later that afternoon, I mentally calculated how much money I had spent on Ethan in just the last 5 years. Between the down payment on the house, the payments for the design studio, the car, the twin schools, and the constant emergencies, it had been at least $230,000. Money I could have used to travel the world, to live comfortably, to fulfill the dreams I had postponed for decades. Instead, I gave it all to a son who considered my love a burden and my presence a nuisance. At 8 p.m., Lisbon time, I calculated it would be 3 p.m. in Miami. Doris would be getting ready to go to Ethan's apartment to deliver the letter that would change everything. I sat on the small balcony of my temporary home, sipping a glass of Portuguese red wine, and waited. I knew that in a few hours my phone would start ringing desperately. Ethan would finally understand what it truly meant to lose me. At midnight, my phone began to vibrate incessantly. It was Ethan. I let it ring until it stopped. Immediately it rang again, and again, and again. On the 5th try, I answered. "Dad!" he yelled, his voice choked with sobs. "Where are you? Doris showed up at the house with a letter from you. She said you disappeared. What's going on? What is this madness?" "Hello, Ethan," I replied calmly, watching the lights of the ancient city as I spoke. "Have you read the letter?" "Yes, I read it. Have you lost your mind? How could you do this to us? Where are you?" "I'm exactly where I need to be, far away from you just as you wished." "But I didn't mean it like that. I didn't want you to actually leave. I was just angry, frustrated." There it was, Ethan's typical tactic. Minimize the damage he had caused, make me feel guilty for reacting to his cruelty. "You didn't mean it when you told me your greatest birthday wish was for me to disappear from your life?" I asked, "because you sounded quite convincing." I was just stressed. Michael lost money on an investment. The kids are having trouble at school. The studio isn't doing well. I shouldn't have taken it out on you. You're right, you shouldn't have. But you did, and words can't be unsaid. But Dad, please come back. We need you. I need you. How interesting. Now he needed me. Now that he had read the letter detailing all the financial benefits he'd lost. Now that he knew he might lose the house. Now that he understood he would have to pay for his own supplemental health insurance and find someone to watch the twins when he wanted to go out. Do you need me or do you need my money? I asked directly. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I need you, he finally mumbled, but his voice lacked conviction. Ethan, for 43 years I lived for you. I sacrificed my dreams, my money, my time, my opportunities, and when I finally needed to feel loved and valued by you, you told me you'd rather I just vanish. Those words broke my heart in a way that can never be fully repaired. I'm so sorry, Dad. I am truly, truly sorry. Apologies aren't enough, Ethan. The damage is done. And you know what? Maybe it was the best thing you could have said to me because it finally opened my eyes and made me realize I've been living my whole life the wrong way. What are you talking about? I mean that for the first time in decades, I'm living for myself. And it's wonderful. Where are you, Dad? Please just tell me. Ethan pleaded, his voice thick with tears. The twins are asking for their grandpa. They don't understand why you're gone. It was fascinating how now that I was unavailable, my grandson suddenly missed me. For all those years when I canceled my plans to look after them, when I bought them expensive gifts, when I took them to the park while Ethan went shopping, it was just what was expected of me. But now that I was gone, my absence was felt. The boys will be fine, I replied, looking up at the stars over Lisbon. They are resilient. What they will learn is that actions have consequences, and that painful words can destroy relationships forever. But Dad, please, you can't just disappear like this. What if something happens to you? What if you get sick? How will we know? Now he was concerned about my well-being. How convenient. Ethan, in the last 3 years, I had 2 high blood pressure episodes that landed me in the hospital. Do you know how many times you visited? 0. You always had something more important to do. That's not true, he protested weakly. It is true. The first time I called you from the emergency room, you said you couldn't come because you had a party at a friend's house. The second time it was Michael's birthday, and you were celebrating. The silence on the other end confirmed that he remembered each occasion perfectly. I didn't think it was serious, he stammered. Of course. Because my health was never a priority for you, but my checks certainly were. It's not about the money, Ethan shouted. It's about you. I miss you, Dad. Do you miss me, or do you miss having someone on call 24/7 to solve your problems? I hung up without waiting for an answer. The phone rang again, but this time I silenced it completely. I needed peace to enjoy my first night of freedom in a new country. The following days were a constant discovery, not just of Lisbon, but of myself. There were parts of my personality, interests, and desires that had been dormant for decades, while I lived in service to Ethan. Now they were waking up one by one, like flowers after a long drought. I discovered I loved Moorish architecture and could spend hours admiring the details of São Jorge Castle. I realized I had a natural talent for languages, and that Portuguese, with its similarities to Spanish, wasn't as difficult as I'd imagined. I rediscovered my love for history, something I had taught for years but hadn't practiced for pleasure in a long time. On Wednesday, I had my meeting with the Portuguese financial advisor. He was an older gentleman named Mr. Ferreira, who helped me understand all my options for permanent residency. With your current savings and your American pension, he explained, you can live comfortably here for many years. Portugal has excellent healthcare programs for foreign retirees, and the quality of life in Lisbon is exceptional. For the first time in years, I spoke openly about my finances without worrying about saving money for Ethan's emergencies. It was liberating to calculate my expenses based solely on my own needs and desires. You can also invest a portion of your savings here in Portugal, Mr. Ferreira continued. The returns are stable and secure. In 5 years, you could significantly increase your net worth if you invest wisely. Increase my net worth. How many times had I had that opportunity, only to spend the money on my son's whims? Is there anything else I should know? I asked. We have many clients in situations similar to yours, the advisor added with a knowing smile. Older people who came to Portugal seeking a new beginning after complicated family relationships. You are not alone in this experience. That information comforted me deeply. I wasn't the only parent who had been manipulated and cast aside by ungrateful children. There was a whole community of people who had chosen their own happiness over the toxic demands of their families. On Friday, I joined a walking group for senior expatriates. There were 12 of us, all between 65 and 80, all seeking adventure and new experiences. During the walk through the hills surrounding Lisbon, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Louise, a 76-year-old Italian who had moved to Portugal 3 years earlier. "What brought you here?" she asked as we admired the panoramic view of the city. "A son who told me his greatest birthday wish was for me to disappear from his life," I answered without any filter. I no longer had the energy to soften reality. Louise's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Completely. After I financed his house, practically raised his kids, and sacrificed my retirement for his needs, he told me my presence in his life was an unbearable burden." "My God," Louise murmured. "And what did you do?" "I disappeared from his life, and here I am." Louise smiled with admiration. "You are very brave. It took me 7 years to make the decision to distance myself from my toxic family. My son and his wife treated me like a walking ATM. For the rest of the walk, Louise and I shared our stories. She had come to Portugal after realizing her adult children only contacted her when they needed money for their vacations, their new cars, or their whims. When she decided to set boundaries, they accused her of being a selfish mother and threatened to keep her from seeing her grandchildren. "The first few months were difficult," Louise confessed as we descended a tree-lined path. "The guilt consumed me. I thought maybe I really was selfish, that a good parent should always sacrifice for their children. And what changed your perspective? I realized my children never once asked if I was happy, if I had enough money for my own needs, or if my constant sacrifices were hurting me. All they cared about was what I could give them. That's not love, David. That's exploitation." Her words resonated deep in my heart. For decades, I had mistaken emotional manipulation for filial love, constant demands for genuine need. At the end of the walk, Louise invited me to a support group that met every 2 weeks for older adults who had made the difficult decision to prioritize their well-being over toxic family expectations. I accepted immediately. That night, I turned on my phone for the first time in 3 days. I had 78 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most were from Ethan and Michael, but there were also a few from unknown numbers, likely friends they had recruited to try and locate me. I read the messages chronologically, observing the evolution of my son's panic. The first ones were still emotional. "Please, Dad, come back. We need you. The kids are crying for you," but gradually, they became more desperate and focused on financial issues. "The bank called us for another meeting. They say you requested a review of the contract as a co-signer. They can't take our house away over a misunderstanding." By the 4th day, the messages had turned aggressive. "This is ridiculous, Dad. You're ruining our lives over a temper tantrum. Act like an adult and come back." And finally, desperate, "I've called all the hospitals, the police, your friends. Nobody knows where you are. If something happens to you, it's going to be my fault. Please, just tell me you're okay." It was fascinating to note that at no point did Ethan genuinely apologize for wishing me out of his life. At no point did he acknowledge the cruelty of his words or express real remorse. Everything revolved around the negative consequences my absence was having on him. I decided to reply to one last message. "I am perfectly fine and happier than I have been in years. What you are experiencing now are the natural consequences of your actions. I hope this experience helps you understand the value of the people you love before it's too late with others in your life." The response was immediate. "Please, Dad, we can fix this. I promise I will never say horrible things again." Just come back. I wrote my final reply. Empty promises don't fix broken hearts, Ethan. The words you said to me revealed what you truly think of me. You can't undo that truth with desperate promises. After sending that message, I blocked his number and all numbers associated with Michael. I also blocked the unknown numbers that had called me. It was time to close this chapter once and for all. The following week, I met with Mr. Ferreira again to sign the papers that would allow me to reside permanently in Portugal. I also made arrangements to transfer my American pension definitively and to begin the process of selling my apartment in Miami. Are you sure you want to make this permanent? Mr. Ferreira asked. It's a very significant decision. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied, signing each document with a firm hand. For the first time in decades, I am making decisions based on my own happiness, not on the demands of others. That afternoon, I received a call from Doris, my dear neighbor and accomplice. Her voice was lively. David, you won't believe this, she said. Ethan came to my apartment yesterday crying hysterically. He begged me to tell you to come back, that it had all been a terrible misunderstanding. And what did you tell him? I told him the truth, that what he had said to you was unforgivable, and that if I were you, I would have disappeared forever too. You should have seen his face when he realized that even the neighbors knew how cruel he had been to you. Did he mention anything about the financial problems? Oh, yes. He said that without your help, they can't afford the mortgage, that the bank is putting on pressure, that Michael can't fix the financial situation, and that the kids need things for school they can't afford. Basically, he realized everything you did for them the moment he lost it. It was exactly as I expected. He didn't miss me as a person. He missed my function as a financial provider and problem solver. Doris, I asked her, when anyone asks about me, especially Ethan, I want you to tell them that I am gone for good. Because in a way, it's true. The David who constantly sacrificed himself for an ungrateful son really did disappear on his birthday. I understand perfectly, Doris replied. And you know what? I think it's the best disappearance you could have possibly chosen. 3 weeks after my arrival in Portugal, my new life had taken shape in ways I never imagined. I enrolled in Portuguese classes 3 times a week. I started a watercolor course on Tuesdays and Thursdays, discovering an artistic talent I never knew I possessed. I joined a book club for expatriates that met on Sundays. For the first time in decades, my calendar was filled with activities I had chosen, activities that brought me pleasure and personal growth, not obligations imposed by the needs of others. But the most surprising transformation was financial. Without the constant demands from Ethan, my savings weren't just stable, they were growing. The investments I had made with Mr. Ferreira were already showing positive returns, and for the first time, I could plan my financial future based solely on my own needs. That Wednesday in April, while sipping my morning coffee on the sunny balcony of my apartment, I received a call from an international number I didn't recognize. I hesitated to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Mr. David Carter, a female voice with an American accent asked. Yes, this is he. Who is this? My name is Rachel Mendoza. I'm a social worker with the Department of Family Services in Miami. I'm calling because we received a report concerning your well-being. My blood ran cold. A report? What kind of report? Your son, Ethan Carter, filed a report alleging that you may be suffering from dementia or cognitive decline and have made financial and life decisions that put you at risk. According to him, you disappeared suddenly and are living in precarious conditions abroad, possibly under the influence of third parties. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ethan had gone to the extreme of involving social services, fabricating a mental illness to invalidate my decisions and force my return. Ms. Mendoza, I replied, my voice firm. I am not suffering from dementia or cognitive decline. I am living in Portugal by my own choice, in a comfortable apartment, with excellent medical care and in perfect mental health. My son's allegations are completely false. I understand your position, Mr. Carter, but we need to verify your well-being. Would it be possible to coordinate a medical and psychological evaluation through the U.S. consulate in Portugal? Of course, I replied without hesitation. I am willing to undergo any evaluation that proves I am in perfect mental health and that my decisions were made with full lucidity. After coordinating the details for the evaluation, I hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of rage and disbelief. Ethan had crossed a line of no return. Not only had he wished me gone, but now he was trying to destroy my mental credibility to regain control over my money and my life. I immediately called my lawyer in Miami, Mr. A. Vargas, who had helped me with all the legal paperwork before my departure. David, he greeted me with concern. I'm glad to hear your voice. I've had a very interesting week with your son. I can imagine. I just spoke with social services. Ethan is accusing me of having dementia. That's not all, Mr. Vargas sighed. He has also hired another lawyer to try and contest all the legal changes you made before you left. He's claiming you were not of sound mind when you signed them. Can he do that? He can try, but he doesn't have a solid legal basis. I have recordings of all our conversations where you clearly demonstrate full lucidity. Furthermore, the fact that you meticulously planned your departure and are living independently in Portugal contradicts any allegation of cognitive decline. What else is he doing? He tried to gain access to your bank accounts, claiming concern for your well-being. He also wanted to halt the process of the claim on the house. But since everything is legally sound, and he himself signed documents acknowledging recent financial troubles, he has no valid arguments. It was incredible how far Ethan was willing to go to recover the financial benefits he had lost. Mr. Vargas, I want you to prepare a defamation lawsuit against my son. His false allegations about my mental state could affect my reputation and my legal rights. It will be a pleasure, he responded with satisfaction. After seeing how he treated you, I think it's time he faced the legal consequences of his actions. 2 days later, I appeared at the U.S. consulate in Lisbon for the medical and psychological evaluations. The appointed doctor, Dr. Torres, was an experienced man who immediately grasped the situation. Mr. Carter, he said after an exhaustive 3-hour evaluation, you are not only in perfect mental health, but the decisions you have made demonstrate admirable lucidity and courage. Your son is clearly trying to manipulate the legal system to recover financial benefits. Will that be documented officially? Absolutely. I will send a detailed report to social services explaining that the allegations are unfounded and that you are living an independent and healthy life in Portugal. That same afternoon, I received a call from the social worker. Mr. Carter, we've received the medical report from the consulate. It's clear that your son's allegations have no merit. We are closing the case and will notify Ethan that his complaints have been deemed unfounded. Thank you, I replied. Will this be recorded in any way? Yes. It will be documented that he made a false report concerning the well-being of a family member, which can have legal implications if it happens again. Perfect. Not only had Ethan failed in his attempt to invalidate my decisions, but he now had an official record of making false reports. That night, I decided to do something I had been putting off. I wrote a detailed account of my experience, not for Ethan, but for other men and women who might be living in similar situations of manipulation and emotional abuse from adult children. I wrote for 4 hours, documenting every sacrifice I had made, every manipulation I had endured, and every step I had taken to reclaim my dignity and my life. I titled the piece, When a Parent's Love Becomes Self-Destruction, My Story of Liberation at 74. I sent the text to a blog I had discovered, one specializing in stories of older adults who had found the courage to radically change their lives. A week later, I received an enthusiastic response from the editor. David, she wrote, your story is powerful and inspiring. We've received hundreds of comments from readers who identify completely with your experience. Would you be willing to participate in a video interview for our YouTube channel? I accepted immediately. It was time to use my experience to help others trapped in toxic family dynamics. The interview was published 2 weeks later and quickly went viral. Thousands of people shared similar stories of adult children who manipulated them emotionally and exploited them financially. The comments were a catalog of pain and recognition. My 37-year-old son lives in my house, pays no rent, and insults me when I ask him to look for a job, wrote one woman. My daughter only calls when she needs money for vacation but never has time to visit when I'm sick, shared another. I thought I was the only parent who felt used by their own children, confessed a third. But the most shocking development came a week after the interview was published. I received an email from an address I immediately recognized. It was from Michael, my son-in-law. David, he wrote, I saw your interview on YouTube. I need you to know that I agree with you completely. What Ethan said was unforgivable, and the way he has treated you for years is unacceptable. I witnessed how he manipulated and used you, but I never had the courage to confront him because we were so dependent on your financial help. He continued, I want you to know that the twins miss you very much and don't understand why you don't come to see them anymore. Ethan told them you're sick and can't visit, but I believe they deserve to know the truth when they're older. The email ended. I know it's probably too late for apologies, but I wanted you to know that at least one person in this family recognizes how much you sacrificed for us. I hope you are happy in your new life. I read the email 3 times before deciding how to respond. Finally, I wrote, Michael, I appreciate your honesty, but belated apologies don't change the damage that was done. I hope this experience helps you to be a better partner and father, and that you teach your sons to value the people who love them before it's too late. It was the first time someone in my family had publicly acknowledged the abuse I had endured. It didn't change my decision to keep my distance, but it gave me a sense of validation I had needed for years. My new life in Portugal was flourishing in unimaginable ways. I had genuine friends who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide. I rediscovered hobbies and passions. I had peace of mind and financial stability. And most importantly, I had dignity. 6 months after my arrival in Portugal, my life had taken a shape I never dreamed possible. It was a sunny spring morning when I received a call that would change everything once again. It was Doris, my dear neighbor and accomplice in Miami. David, she said, her voice animated, you have to hear this. Ethan lost the house. My heart stopped for a second. Despite everything, a part of me still worried about the well-being of my grandsons. What happened exactly? I asked. The bank foreclosed on the mortgage last week. Michael couldn't recover the money he lost. They fell behind on 3 more payments, and since you were the co-signer and exercised your legal rights, the bank proceeded with the foreclosure. Ethan came to me yesterday crying desperately. And the boys, are they okay? They've moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Michael finally got a steady job at a tourism company, making much less than before, but at least it's stable. Ethan also had to go back to work at the studio, not as the owner, but as an employee. The mix of feelings I experienced was strange. I didn't feel joy at their suffering, but a deep sense of justice. For the first time in their lives, Ethan and Michael were living with the real consequences of their decisions, without someone to bail them out. There's something else, Doris continued. Ethan asked me if I knew how to contact you. He said he wants to genuinely apologize, that he finally understands everything he lost when he lost you. And what did you tell him? I said that some wounds are too deep to heal, and that some words can never be unsaid. I also said that you are flourishing in your new life, and that it's probably best for both of you if he doesn't try to contact you. Doris was right. Over these 6 months, I had built an inner peace that I didn't want to risk for the empty promises of a son who repeatedly proved he only valued me when he needed me. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Mr. Vargas. David, I have some interesting news, he said. Ethan's house was sold by the bank, and as you were the co-signer, you have the right to recover your initial investment of $80,000 plus accrued interest. How much is that in total? $110,000. The bank has already approved the transfer. The money will be in your Portuguese account next week. It was incredible. Not only had I recovered my original investment, but I had gained an additional $30,000. Money that would have been lost forever if I had continued to be the eternally sacrificial father. There's one other thing, Mr. Vargas continued. Your apartment in Miami has finally been sold. After commissions and expenses, the net value is $280,000. In total, I was receiving nearly $400,000 in assets I had written off as lost. With my existing savings and the investments I had made in Portugal, my net worth now exceeded $1 million. At 74 years old, I was wealthier than I had ever been in my entire life. That night, I celebrated at my favorite restaurant in Praça do Comércio. I ordered the best Portuguese sparkling wine and toasted to the brave man who had the courage to start over when all seemed lost. As I ate, I reflected on the entire journey. I had started this as a broken and humiliated father, devastated by the cruel words of an ungrateful son. But now I was an independent, financially stable man, surrounded by genuine friends and living the life I had always dreamed of. The next day, I decided to do something I had been considering for weeks. Write a full book about my experience. Not just my story, but a practical guide for older parents trapped in toxic family relationships. I contacted a Portuguese publisher that specialized in self-help and personal growth books. The editor, a woman named Montserrat, was immediately interested. David, she told me during our meeting, your story touches on a subject that affects millions of people but is rarely discussed openly. Emotional abuse by adult children is an epidemic that needs to be exposed. I spent the next 3 months writing When Love Hurts, Breaking Free from Family Emotional Abuse After 70. The book documented not only my personal experience, but also practical strategies for recognizing manipulation, setting healthy boundaries, and finding the courage to prioritize one's own well-being. The book was published 8 months later and became a bestseller in several countries in Europe and the Americas. The letters I received from readers were extraordinary. People from all over the world wrote to me, sharing how my story had given them the courage to make radical changes in their own lives. I read your book and finally understood that I am not a bad mother for refusing to continue financing my 42-year-old son's irresponsibility, wrote Martha from Chile. Your story helped me understand that true love does not demand self-destruction, shared Teresa from Portugal. After reading your book, I sold my large house and moved into a small apartment I can afford without relying on my children's help. For the first time in years, I sleep peacefully, related Sofia from Argentina. But the letter that moved me the most arrived a year after the book's publication. It was from a young mother named Paula. Mr. Carter, she wrote, I am 32 years old and have a 67-year-old father who has sacrificed his entire life for me and my siblings. After reading your book, I realized we are treating him exactly as Ethan treated you. Your story opened my eyes and made me understand that I was repeating a toxic pattern that could destroy my relationship with my father forever. Yesterday, I called my dad and apologized for all the years of taking him for granted. I also told him that I want to help him realize his own dreams instead of expecting him to always be available for mine. Thank you for helping me understand this before it was too late. That letter made me cry with joy. My pain had served to prevent other families from going through the same destruction. 2 years after my arrival in Portugal, I received a physical letter in my mailbox. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar, but I couldn't immediately place it. When I opened it, my heart quickened. It was from my grandsons, now 13 years old. Dear Grandpa David, they wrote in teenage script. Dad told us the truth about why you left. He said Mom's partner said very cruel things to you, and that's why you decided to start a new life far away from us. We want you to know that we miss you very much, and that we understand why you left. We also want you to know that we are proud of you for being so brave. When we're older, we would like to visit you in Portugal if you're willing to have us. The letter included drawings they had made of me living happily on the streets of Lisbon. I cried for an hour after reading that letter, not out of sadness, but from the understanding that my decision to preserve my dignity had been the right one, even if it meant distancing myself from people I loved. I decided to write back. My dearest grandsons, I wrote, your words are the most beautiful gift I have received in years. I love you deeply and always will, no matter the distance. When you are older and can make your own decisions, the doors of my heart and my home will always be open to you. Until then, I want you to know that Grandpa is living a full and happy life, surrounded by beauty and peace. Hold on to the love you feel for me, but also learn from this experience. Words have the power to build or to destroy, and relationships are built on mutual respect, not unilateral sacrifice. I love you with all my heart. Today, 3 years after that terrible birthday that changed my life forever, I am sitting on the balcony of my new apartment in Lisbon, which I bought with my own money, gazing at the Tagus River as I write the final lines of my story. I am 77 years old, with a net worth of over $1.5 million, a best-selling book translated into 8 languages, dear friends from all over the world, and an inner peace I never thought I would experience again. Ethan asked me for a birthday gift, for me to disappear from his life. I granted him that wish in the most extraordinary way possible. What he never calculated was that in losing me, he didn't just lose a father who loved him unconditionally, but also the person who had kept his financial world stable for decades. Last week, I received an email from Ethan, the first direct contact in 3 years. "Dad," he wrote, "I read your book. I never imagined how much I hurt you, how much you sacrificed for me, how much I took you for granted my entire life. I'm not asking you to come back or to forgive me. I just want you to know that I finally understand what you tried to teach me, albeit in the hardest way possible. I hope you are happy in your new life because you deserve all the happiness in the world." I didn't reply to the email. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. But I kept his words in my heart, not as a victory, but as a confirmation that all pain can eventually be transformed into wisdom. My disappearance was my gift to him. My new life was my gift to myself. And it was worth every tear, every sacrifice, and every moment of pain that brought me here. Because sometimes the only way to save yourself is to have the courage to get completely lost, only to be reborn as the person you were always meant to be. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click on this next video appearing on the screen because in it, there's a tale of betrayal and a twist like you've never seen before.